so all the press and pundits believed it right until the very last minute when the Conservative incumbent was handsomely re-elected. I can't imagine at all what that's like in this country. We haven't had anything that happened like that recently.
But your pollsters were more accurate.
Well, not much in it, I don't think. I think both professions in both countries are pretty disgraceful. He is previously the Minister of Welfare in this country's government, the leader of the Zionist Union Party and the Zionist Union Movement, but also the Israeli Labour Party. I hope you'll give a warm welcome to Isaac Bushi Herzog. I should say I'm Jonathan Friedland, I write for The Guardian and other places. An event organised by Jewish News. I won't mention one of the other places I write for. We're going to have a conversation here for about 25 minutes or so, and we've got a lot to rattle through. I just brought up the uncomfortable subject of that election defeat in March. There's huge amounts of analysis that have gone on here about the Labour defeat in this country. Obviously, an entirely different story in your country. What's now, with several months that have passed, your analysis of why it was that you fell short in this election and Benjamin Netanyahu came back?
First, we have to put some of the facts clearer because it's a different picture from the United Kingdom. The structure here is different, and therefore we measure it according to the mandates and number of votes. So just, to balance it a bit, your opening remarks, the fact of the matter is that my party grew dramatically. And in terms of absolute votes, we've almost doubled our support. We had around 400,000+ votes in 2013, and this time we touched 800,000. So in terms of mandates as well, we've grown to 24. And since Yitzhak Rabin's victory, Labour, not the candidate, has never received such a number. I'm happy to see Shimon Sheves, who was the chief of the Prime Minister's office in Rabin's time and was head of his campaign. And therefore, this was a historical process, which I think is important because it leads to the fact that there is a strengthening of the alternative camp. However, I do not flee away or run away from any of the errors, or the faulty analysis that at the end we woke up with a different result. The issue being that in my mind, towards the end, clearly Netanyahu treaded upon very sensitive chords in our society, leading to the fact that in the last days he has amassed a campaign which touched upon the innate fears of Israelis, including using the feeling against Arabs in the public on the election day, saying the Arabs are on their way in buses to vote. Please, everybody, get out to vote. And this has definitely triggered something which we were unaware of. We knew always that there is innate pressure, but driving people to vote under such circumstances, together with other circumstances, led to the fact that a huge amount of voters shifted, or decided to get out and vote rather than what they've done in 2013, and this led to his lead. However, as opposed to the United Kingdom again, Netanyahu hardly had the capability of forming a government. And moreover, he's now leading a hung coalition of 61 members, whilst I lead an opposition of 59.
Let's just go back to those remarks he made in the closing days of the campaign. You mentioned his point about get out to vote because Arab voters, and we should stress Arab citizens of Israel, are voting.
Which definitely has an unpleasant undertones to this.
Right, and then you also made this point about saying no Palestinian state under me. The Americans were very unhappy about both of those remarks and made it pretty clear through the White House spokesman. Is there a lasting damage done to him, to Israel, to its legitimacy because of those two cards he played in those last hours of the campaign?
Clearly, we are paying a price for this world over by it being used by our enemies. Look, we are a liberal democracy. We are a source of pride to our people and to those democratic forces all over the world. I always reiterate the fact that our strongest arm of government is the Supreme Court. I'm very proud of the fact that in my opposition, the one which I lead, there are forces which you would never see anywhere definitely not in the Middle East. For example, we have Muslim Brotherhood party in our opposition, something which you don't see anywhere else, not in the region, let alone in other parts of the world. However, the comments of Netanyahu are being used to erode one of our most important, I would say, defense shields, which is we are the only democracy in the region, and we treat all our citizens equally, and we look at them equally. And I was flabbergasted and angry, and I made a point of it, that Netanyahu's comments were unacceptable and should not have been said by a Prime Minister of the Jewish state. And I said it upon the swearing in of the government. Should not have been said under any circumstances. And therefore, I cannot analyze the circumstance, the repercussions of what he said. But I say personally, people tell me you should have been more of a demagogue, you should have been more aggressive. There are certain lines I don't think a responsible leader should cross. And I hope we won't pay a price. A lot depends on Netanyahu himself.
Let's talk about the message that he's making very central. It's been debated already a little bit this morning. That the new threat, new, putting inverted commas, but a serious existential threat, you heard Shaul Mofaz before calling it evil, is the threat of boycott, divestment, sanctions, the BDS campaign against Israel. That's the message from the government, but we've heard less about where the opposition stand on that. Is your assessment the same as his, that this threat of BDS is now on a par with the great historic threats, or on a par with Iran or the Palestinian question, as a huge question for Israel, or do you take a different view?
We made it clear, especially my friends at the Zionist Union, which I lead, which is the combination of a front led by Labour, led by me, and Tzipi Livni of Hatnuah, that we will do whatever it takes to help the good name of the State of Israel and protect it. And we were here last week, and we are here this week. As I landed, I went to speak at the student caucus of London School of Economics. It was a heated debate. There were violent demonstrations outside, 3 demonstrations as far as I was told. But at the end, students have to listen. I'm extremely bothered by the lurking Israel hate on campuses around the world and in the UK, as it sips in, it goes into the class. In the class you have an anti-Israel lecturer and anti-Israel student. And there's nobody listening to the other side of the story. Now, hey, everybody, put it in perspective. With all due respect, the real challenges of the region are not in Israel or in the territories. The real challenges are just not far away. Let's say a 1-hour flight from us, where ISIS is, and Syria, and Hezbollah, and Hamas. We know the whole story. We're in a group here of people who know what I'm talking about. So I realize, and I definitely concur with the analysis, that this is a long-term threat, because it influences young people who are going to assume leadership positions here, there, and everywhere, and they only listen to one side of the story, and they are brainwashed, and they are told stories against Israel which are unfounded and don't take into account the mere inherent, vibrant, aggressive, open democracy that we've got. However, I've said it publicly, and I said it in the Knesset last week. In order to combat that, we have to unite some forces together, both in the Jewish community that has to work more effectively, and the Israeli government, which should invest in it largely, in a large scope of activity. But let's be frank, also tilt the balance in the region by coming forward with a bold peace plan that makes change, that gives us the ability to cooperate with our partners who are partnering with us on the Iranian situation, partners in the region, making kind of an immediate change, what I call ippon in judo, something that changes the picture altogether, because that helps combat the BDS campaign.
Right, so your view is it would draw some of the sting, or it would drain some of the energy from the BDS movement if Israel was seen as, the government of Israel was seen as being in a peace-seeking position, and it isn't at the moment.
But let me explain. First of all, the problem with part of the BDS campaign is that it has already nothing to do with settlements. It's got to do with Israel hate proper, which is really bothering me, because it's something which we haven't seen, and all of a sudden emerges. And as if we don't have a right to exist.
Wouldn't you want to draw a distinction here between the people who are leading the BDS campaign, who may absolutely be, as you described, people who want to see no Israel and Israel not exist, and those people, particularly young people, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are signing up for it, aren't they drawn to it because, yes, they oppose
I'll tell you
settlements,
who is
occupation?
drawn. The problem is the ones who are drawn to it due to activities here and there that are viewed as problematic, as also the mainstream of public opinion. I mean, we're not going to convince the BDS leaders. We should convince the rank and file and the mainstream of public body and voters and opinion makers that Israel is on the right track. And there is a problem here because the settlement policy has been adverse, mostly, to our interests.
Expand on that, how it's been adverse to
You know it. I mean, the fact that whenever Israel takes steps that go beyond the settlement blocks, or as viewed as a settlement activity which, shuns away Palestinians or hurts the Palestinian average citizen as being depicted by the media and the like. I don't have to tell you, you're from The Guardian. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I thought you'd get to that earlier. Just before we leave BDS, you used the word perspective before.
Sometimes these things fuel Israel.
Here's the thing about perspective I was going to ask you. I've heard people say, who wouldn't differ from you at all in their opposition to BDS, saying, nevertheless, at the moment, it is a few student unions, regrettable, lamentable, worse, deplorable even, but it's a few student unions, it's a few other places. It is actually the government of Israel, by building it up and speaking about it as if it's this huge existential threat, on a par with Iran, that is actually inflating, puffing up the BDS movement, giving them a status they never could have earned themselves, giving them the publicity they want. There are people who are pro-Israel strongly who say to me, the BDS movement's best friend is Bibi Netanyahu at the moment, because he's giving them this world status that they otherwise wouldn't have.
So the answer is mixed. It could be that the student union resolution, which was a repeat of last year's student union resolution, could have been treated differently, but we cannot ignore. I heard PhD students and master students in various colleges and universities here, and what they really feel in class. And I know about Israeli artists, and I know about Israeli academics trying to relate to UK academics, and the picture is mixed. But I think there's an engine working against Israel all the time. By the way, financed by moderate Arab states as well, and by many Israel haters around the world. And it's a combination, a cocktail of Israel haters, Palestinian forces, Arab forces, and left-wing forces, all combined. Now, we cannot ignore that. I say that we have to be smart in the way we operate. And the recent events have been accumulating together and led to us being disturbed by the way this is being managed. And that's why we cannot ignore it. It comes forward with decisions of companies around the world to be more careful and reserved as to the business they're doing with Israel. It came about with pension funds and their decisions how to invest. There are issues all the time. Whether we like it or not, we cannot ignore it. And therefore, I feel that the case for Israel should be presented in an organized manner, in an effective manner. There are great people here that lecture and speak, but I'm not sure they feel what's going on in class. You know, Lord Sachs, Chief Rabbi is here, well, I have tremendous respect for him. So when he speaks, people listen, but does he speak to the I would say 19, 20-year-old students on a daily basis that go into the class and analyze the Middle East as a whole. I'm not sure, and I don't expect him to do so. I think we have to focus on a multitude of steps that need to be taken.
And your point before was that the game-changing move would be if Israel itself was in a new diplomatic strategy, a new diplomatic initiative. And some people will say to you, how will you yourself achieve that best? Will it be as leader of the opposition? Or should you be on the inside, fighting on the inside? And it looks pretty obvious there's a seat reserved for you there in the coalition. The foreign minister's seat has been left vacant. If you want Israel to have a new diplomatic initiative, to be seen as the party seeking peace in the region, shouldn't you be in government? Because there's obviously a role for you there if you wanted to.
You're now moving to the political realm. The political realm is confusing. First of all, I'm happy to introduce my friend Omer Bar-Lev, who's a member of my faction, who's here. And we have some other politicians who are going to be present today. The picture is complex, more than just saying, hey, you have a job vacant and Daniel Taub wants you to be his boss. But it's more than that. And I'm not embarrassing Daniel, it's only a joke. But the real truth of the matter is that...
Nervous laughter coming.
Daniel, I'm not hurting any of your chances. So I'm retracting from my comment, just a friendly comment. Really great Israeli ambassador, and we're sorry you're leaving us. And we hope you will succeed. But the truth is that it doesn't work this way, Jonathan. I mean, you come from a culture of opposition and government, and you expect us immediately to mix everything together.
Now here it would never happen. The leader of the Labour Party wouldn't go into coalition with the Conservative Prime Minister. That wouldn't happen here, but that does happen in Israel quite often, and I wonder if it's going to happen
when
again.
I spoke with both Prime Minister Cameron and with Ed Miliband as leader of the opposition, they were extremely surprised at the amount of interaction that the leader of the opposition has with the Prime Minister in Israel. And I have constant interaction with Netanyahu. And there are things that we said we will be responsible about, and there are things that have helped Netanyahu on in the international front when it comes to Israel's security and well-being.
Would you to be clear?
But that doesn't mean that we have to make a political step that will be horrendous to the capability of the alternative to be presented. And again, I have to put things on record. I was cautious throughout the election and thereafter not to close alternatives because I'm a responsible Israeli leader. And I think that every Israeli leader should keep all options open. It was Netanyahu who throughout the election said, I will not sit with Herzog and Livni. They are anti-Zionist leftists, okay? Knowing where my family comes from, it looks a bit odd to me, but that doesn't matter. And especially the British Jewish community knows a lot about what I'm speaking about. But he said it. Now, the problem is that I don't see any platform on which Netanyahu can accommodate what I believe in. I don't see him moving towards peace the way I would do, or I don't see him moving on other issues the way I would do. And therefore, I made it clear in Parliament that we hold different ideology or concept of where things should go differently from his. And that's on a political level. That's where we're at today.
So just because you want to put things on the record, which is useful and helpful, will you put it on the record now that you rule out entering his government?
Well, that's such an ordinary type question. Don't take it. I'm not there. I'm not dealing in theoretics at all. And I said I'm not dealing in theoretics. And at this present moment, there is no justification for us going into the government at all. I don't see myself joining this government. My aim is to replace this government. And once Netanyahu holds a 61-hung coalition, I don't see that coalition ruling the nation more than a few months or a year from now.
You didn't rule it out. But you say that this moment, but that's fine. Before you came in the room, there was a discussion here about Iran. And two quite conflicting views were advanced. One which said that the deal is real and there's real potential here and advantage for Israel. And others that were deeply skeptical of the deal. In fact, those who said there is no deal and that nobody should be duped. Where are you on that question? And the sense that Israel, some have detected that Netanyahu perhaps has shifted from the previous position of thinking that was the number one issue, and is now, in a way, they would say so, has sort of moved on from it?
No, I definitely think it's at this very moment in history, at this very moment in world diplomacy, this is the number one issue, undoubtedly the number one issue. And the world leadership bears enormous responsibility as to the outcome of this process. And there is no daylight between Netanyahu, me and Netanyahu as to the risks entailed in this issue. However, what we presented as a position paper of my faction is that we don't judge the deal. And I don't rule out a diplomatic deal. I don't rule out diplomacy. Actually, I think diplomacy is a preference if the deal can be reasonable. Now, what are the litmus tests of this deal? Is number one, the inspection regime. We demand an improved, enhanced inspection regime that will be 24/7 on all sites. And what we hear from Tehran, of course, is adamant objection to it. I've seen a resolution of the Iranian parliament yesterday against it. I think the world should be firm and tough on this issue with no ifs and buts, because otherwise, what the hell for? If you don't have a deal, you can be supervised, make sure that nobody is cheating upon us, then world safety is in jeopardy. Secondly, the issue of the rollout of the sanction. Again, it should be a quid pro quo. There are 3 tiers of sanctions. I won't bore the public with their details, but the sanctions regime should be rolled out gradually so that there is a quid pro quo here.
Rolled back gradually, yes. If it's the regime.
Rolled back, lifted, right, not instantaneously.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you leash a huge amount of resources into a regime that undermines the stability of the region. Actually, if it could have been possible, the issue of the stability of the region and Iranian rogue activity in the region should have been included in the deal, but it's not there right now. And thirdly, what one calls the snapback, namely, what happens if Iran violates the deal? And I've demanded, and we have demanded, first of all, an in-depth understanding with the United States and the P5+1 as to giving Israel a qualitative edge, both militarily and otherwise, including the ability to take steps, military, if they violate the deal. Now, that hasn't been done by Netanyahu. He hasn't gone into an in-depth discussion with the administration due to the lack of his proper relationship with the administration. And I think that's a must, and I've called upon him to move forward and negotiate with the administration in Washington as to what are the parameters of what Israel gets in order to have its qualitative edge.
So your critique, you said there's no daylight between you on the substance. Your critique is partly how he's handled the crucial strategic relationship.
In the election, I didn't hide my critique that the appearance in Congress was a mistake.
Because the other critique you hear is that even among people who would share the analysis you just advanced, is that true though it is, they would say, it's used by Netanyahu partly as an excuse not to talk about the Palestinian question. By saying, going to the UN and going to Congress and saying, this is the number one thing, Iran, it means you don't have to think about or launch the kind of initiatives and discussion you were speaking about earlier about the Palestinian question.
You cannot
and maybe it's been very effective.
You cannot take the Palestinian issue off the table. Everybody knows it. You have to be an ostrich to believe that.
But there's been no action over it for so long.
Well, there has been no action for a variety of reasons. Number one, because both leaders are reluctant to move. And both leaders don't talk to each other, meaning Abbas and Netanyahu. And there has been no progress because we had elections, and because the world has been reluctant following the collapse of the Kerry talks. But there's no vacuum. No vacuum. It cannot stay there. Stagnant waters are dangerous. They bring all the fleas and bees that you can imagine. And therefore we have to move. We have to move. And that calls for both leaders to move. And I demand from Netanyahu to move, and I believe there has to be a plan put on the table, a scheme. I realize that Abbas may be reluctant and won't want, and he's kind of locked in his premonition that there's no hope. And I said in the elections that if I assume office, I will reignite the process by way of a mixture, combination of confidence-building measures, mutual, by the way, which would give the Palestinians certain benefits, and also they would alleviate and relax some of their activities in the international front, unilateral activities which are adverse to Israel's security, such as the ICC, and from there on create a platform on a regional basis that will lead to talks. Jordan, Egypt, together we have at the end bring the parties into a room and talk.
Shaul Mofaz did before earlier this morning, so there should be an international conference involving the Arab League.
Okay, fine. We all like to talk about conferences. You will hear about conferences throughout the day.
So what's the move you would?
Let's talk.
Directly.
Let's talk. Absolutely. And I don't mind actually an umbrella, an international umbrella. I have a regional, definitely. It's called for. It's needed. It's ripe and ready out there. There is actually an opportunity here more than ever before, in light of the fact that there is a kind of a common denominator by Israel and the moderate Arab states on Iran. It should serve as a platform to move on the Palestinian issue.
And there is something,
but it calls for steps to be taken. And right now, Netanyahu's coalition does not enable him to move there.
Yeah. You say about face-to-face talks. There are some people, Ephraim Halevi is probably the most eminent who has advanced this position, who says talks eventually is going to have to include you-know-who. It's going to have to be Hamas. And partly they say because look who's breathing down Hamas's neck in Gaza, ISIS are making attacks. Hamas has so far put those down. But if you don't deal with Hamas, you'll wait 5 years and you'll be dealing with ISIS instead.
Well, I want to offer a different view,
yep,
which would say the following. We've got to deal with Gaza. We cannot leave Gaza simmering as a pressure cooker that can explode yet again. And Gaza can become an explosive place again with another round. So we have to deal with Gaza. How do we deal with Gaza? The objective should be return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, demilitarize Gaza, giving hope to the people of Gaza, lifting the pressure on Gaza. It should include a multi-party process, which will include Egypt, which will include other member states in the region, which will include the Palestinian Authority and European and other members that would come forward with a plan that can enable long-term ceasefire in Gaza, alleviation of the pressure, enabling the PA to get into Gaza in the process, building a long-term demilitarization, and seeing how, at the end, the political system of the Palestinians becomes inclusive and enables the parties to join. It's very complicated, I don't say, but one has an opportunity now. You hear the Egyptians saying they're willing to be more flexible on what's going on in Gaza, opening the passage to their side. You hear European voices, you hear Qatari voices, you hear many voices. There is much more of a goods and services flow of products from Israel to Gaza. Let's see how we move from here before it becomes impossible. Actually trying to differentiate a bit between the people of Gaza and Hamas itself. I'll give you an example. I met last week with the president of Cyprus, and Cyprus is still willing to host a mechanism whereby Limassol can be the front port to scrutinize goods and services to Gaza. I don't know, there are many ideas thrown to the table. Let's be innovative enough before it's too late and use that as a linchpin for the whole Palestinian question.
We've almost out of time. I wanted to end on the note you wanted to end on. You had a message for us, something about
I don't have a message.
Head of state of this country.
I want to say something which I think is of great importance. I want to pay huge respect to Her Majesty for visiting Germany today and going to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Because my late father, Chaim Herzog, who later became the president of Israel, was one of the first British officers to enter Bergen-Belsen. And he fought in the Guards, and he crossed into Normandy, liberated a part of the 8th Army, led by General Brian Horrocks, liberated Belgium, Holland, northern Germany, concentration camps, and they've entered Bergen-Belsen. And my father always spoke about the entry to Bergen-Belsen, where he approached people who were lying in pajamas and on the ground, almost dead, and saying to them in Yiddish, or I'm an officer from the Eretz Israel. I'm coming to, and they didn't believe. They thought it's a Nazi plot. And some of them, of course, collapsed and cried. And he always depicted the terrible smell, the terrible horrors that they were seen there. And I think the Queen's visit to Bergen-Belsen, it should be used as a lesson to the young generation of Europe and Great Britain as to what exactly happened, because it is linked directly to the story of the State of Israel, and to the story of the Jewish people, and hatred, and racism, and xenophobia, and therefore I found it appropriate to mention it here today in Parliament.
Thank you.
For a Guardian journalist, you are pretty mild.
And the Queen making a visit to Israel, you would support that?
Of course, but of course, that would be a great historical visit. And it was raised, actually, when my father came as president, he met the Queen 3 times on official visits. And there is a hope that it should be done once. I know that Britain has reservations because of the conflict. If you ask me, it would be very important, especially as Princess Philip family is buried in Mount Zion. But let me just conclude with a humoristic anecdote from that visit, which my father had. Yes, the Queen explained to my father that the family believes that they are descendants of King David. And we have also a belief in our family, and I don't think we're too much of an ego, but it goes for all sorts of rabbis all the way to Rashi, and Rashi to King David. So when she said it, my father said, welcome to the family.